Hey, welcome back to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. We are the news division of United Network. We're also part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And our mission is to bring you the real news each and every week. We release a ton of content that includes in-depth stories that the team and I research for you guys and present. That includes information and stories told through the eyes of our field messengers. We also talk about the restoration of our planet, how lots of things are changing. And most of that content comes from updates from the Global Intelligence Agency. Kim Gogan is the head of the GIA, and she comes on and gives us updates throughout the week. So just a quick heads up, Kim has been very, very busy over the last week. I mean, for a while now, she's been really busy. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and Kim is also in the process of leaving Durango, Colorado, and going somewhere far, far away from these crazy Nazi people that are trying to retain any kind of resemblance of control on this planet and trying to use Kim as a means to accomplish that. So we do not have any updates from Kim as far as, I've got some text things that I'm going to share, but no sound bites today. But we do have a lot of other news to cover. Things, like I said, the field messengers have been working really hard. The team and I have a lot of news stories to share with you. But no sound bites from Kim this week. If you want more information about United Network News, who we are and what we do, you can visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. And I hope if this is your first time joining us, that you'll stick with us. We release these podcast episodes once a week, and it's really a good way to catch up on all the content that we've released throughout the week. So if you miss something, you can catch up, just listen to the podcast, and we'll go over the stories. With anything that we put out there, it's really important that you think critically, that you ask questions. Any kind of content you're consuming, doesn't matter if it's mainstream media or, alternative media, just listening to your friends, your family, it doesn't matter. We all have to be in a position where we're relying more on our discernment than whatever meets the eye. Because your discernment is your ability to be able to tell the difference between something that holds truth for you and something that is completely false. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. There's a lot of lies out there, a lot of misinformation, disinformation, right? Disinformation is when it's deliberate, and there's a lot of that going on. There's also a lot of innocent people that are trying to figure out what's going on, but, they're still spreading misinformation. So you really have to turn inward. This is how we get to know ourselves better. And once you know yourself, you can figure the other things out more easily. You can recognize things in your environment. You can understand the different power plays that are happening right now on this planet. Everything becomes a little more obvious. So think critically, ask questions about any content you come across, do your own research, and then share what you find with other people, what you've discovered. And that's my words of wisdom for today, guys. Let's get to the news. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. We're kicking things off with our field messengers, and our field messengers are so important to UNN. We really do think that this is how we're going to change the face of news, and that's you guys going out there and sharing what's going on. On some level, this has been happening for a long time already. People are sharing things on different platforms like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all these other social media platforms, and sometimes when you get too close to the truth, that information gets censored. But this is how we all grow and we learn, right? And we embrace that here at UNN. And we want you guys to share what is going on in your communities. And you're certainly not doing this alone. We have a whole team, a whole production team that is here to help you guys. We have a Telegram group where you can ask questions. If you're thinking of working on a story, you don't have to have any kind of production background. We just need the information from you. We need you to record some stuff with your phone. You don't have to have any kind of prior experience. And then you send that to our team, and our team puts it together for you. And then we put it up on the news. So let's talk about some of the stories that were released this week. We have Amy out of New Jersey talking about the Sterling Hill mine. And this has been made into a museum. It's not a working mine anymore, but she says it's the nation's oldest and largest zinc mine. And because they've made it into a museum, you can learn a lot about not just that mine, but mining in general. Like, what are their procedures, their safety procedures? How do they clock in and clock out? How do they make sure everyone stays safe, or at least, everyone leaves at the end of the day? They don't leave anyone behind, because there were a lot of people, a lot of miners working in these different areas on different levels, right? Like physical levels, like level 1, level 2, level 3, right? It would be easy for someone to be left behind. It was a completely different time, right? And so we learned a little bit more about that. We learned how they hung their clothes up to dry. This particular mine had been in operation for 240 years. It closed in 1986. And we also learned a little bit more about the phrase canary in the coal mine. And apparently this has to do with the levels of, I was going to say pollution, but any kind of hazardous levels in the mine, because canaries wouldn't be able to sing if there was too much toxicity. And so you knew if the canaries were in there and they stopped singing, then you need to grab that canary and your buddies and get out of the mine. So that's where canary in the coal mine, that whole expression came from. Anyway, if you'd like to learn anything about miners, it was a very interesting story. So we appreciate that, Amy. All right, Keith out of Texas talks about the windmills in the South Plains of Texas. So this is West Texas we're talking about, because that's a very big state in the U.S. And he's literally out there on the scene. You can see all these windmills behind him, and most of them are pretty idle. They're not moving at all. And this was during a so-called electricity crisis. And according to Keith, the type of wind that was taking place that day that he was there should have generated a lot more motion from these windmills. So basically, Keith is standing there going, they say that there's an electricity crisis. These windmills should be operating at a much higher capacity, right? They should be turning a lot faster based on the wind. And it just raises a lot of questions about energy management. And this is, in an area where it's pretty windy. That's why they put them there in the first place. So you kind of have to, sometimes you got to ask these kind of questions when you're just driving by, right? All right. Our Nightway Jacqueline from Uganda shows us how to make banana crisps. It's a very popular snack in their region. And this was fun because she's literally there on a banana plantation, I guess I'll call it. And she takes us through the whole process, right? From harvesting it, from slicing up the bananas. They've got some machines that help them with all of this until, it's actually in a box. She just takes us through the whole process. Very interesting. Emma out of Spain shows us how to make cracker bread. And I think this would be a really good alternative to granola. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to make granola. That is tricky. To not have it, to make it crunchy as opposed to gooey and very bendable, which has been my experience. Anytime my kids and I try to make granola, it's not crisp. So when I saw Emma's recipe here and she went through the whole process, I was like, oh, maybe we should try to make that instead. Maybe we'll have a much easier time coming up with a good snack after that. But she uses a bunch of different seeds. I think she said cashew, chia seeds, different types of flax seeds, sunflower and pumpkin seeds. She soaks them overnight, and then you kind of mix it all up. It kind of makes this paste, and you flatten it, and you bake it, and you turn it around a little bit. She gives all the instructions of what she does. And then, she cuts it up and, it's a nice little snack. So definitely going to try that one. Kazué out of Japan takes us to the Hanami festival. So Hanami, she broke up what this term actually means. The definition for it or literally what the words translate into, and it translates into flower viewing. And that's exactly what people do. This takes place at the Osaka Castle Park. So there's a literal castle and there's a moat, although the moat doesn't have any water in it. But there's a lot of history in the area. Very beautiful. A different type of castle. When I think of castle, I think of them looking a certain way. Japanese castles look a little bit different, but still very beautiful. They light it up at night. It's gorgeous. And it has these incredible cherry blossom trees, which at the time of her recording were in full bloom. And she just shows us around and talks about the culture. And there were a lot of people hanging out and, doing some fun things and really just appreciating what nature was doing at the time. So it's a good reminder for us, right? Sometimes we're just so busy, we don't just stop to appreciate the seasons. And, it's that whole expression, stop and smell the roses. It's very true, right? We're just like too busy, at least here in the West. We're just too busy doing all this different stuff. And sometimes you just have to really appreciate the cherry blossoms. Lisa out of Germany talks about, there's a town in Germany, and I believe this is where she says her brother lives, where the government, specifically the mayor, has the first option to buy homes before they go on the market for the general public. So unless you are passing down a home from a blood relative, and apparently that makes all the difference in the world, then the government has first option to buy it. And Lisa put on her thinking cap about what this actually means, because it is a controversial policy and we should be questioning these things and don't always assume that it's for a good thing. Now, in this case, she said that she actually went with her brother and met with the mayor, who she says was very apologetic about all this. And I think this is a good reminder that even though these nefarious policies may be in place, sometimes the people that are currently in positions to enforce those, they don't necessarily, agree with it. It wasn't their idea. They just are kind of in a bad situation. And it sounds like that's what was going on here, where the mayor didn't really believe in this policy. But still, part of the mayor's job is to follow through with these rules. And then once they acquire the land, then they pass it along to a developer, right? I mean, it's all about money, right? And ownership of things. And who knows, who's ultimately going to, own this. But it's good to raise questions like this. So Lisa, thank you for your report. Anna Marie from Switzerland. Oh, I love this story. We've run it a couple times and it gets better and better every time I see it. So in Switzerland, there is the jingle of bells and the rhythm of hoofbeats on the road as goats, sheep, and cows are coming back to the valley. So this is something that happens. It's a seasonal thing, right? So instead of it just kind of being a boring trot to move animals from one location to the next because the seasons are changing, you make a parade out of it, which is just really cool because the animals were all decorated and, nothing overbearing or anything like that, but they had a lot of bells on them. And it was like a celebration, like a, changing of the guard, so to speak. That's kind of what it felt like. It was like, we're moving, we're coming from here, and now we're going over there. And lots of animals on this road that was like climbing up the mountain, which you just don't see every day, right? It was beautiful. So Anne-Marie, thank you for that report. Leanne and Gary out of New South Wales in Tamworth, New South Wales. They are showing their garden and how things are changing with their garden. And they're planting a lot of different things. They are all about sustainable farming practices. So they have these different rows of different plants. So Gary was telling us about what they're planting and how they have things set up. They even like next to the plants, they have these chickens, right? And the chickens help prepare the ground through regenerative farming. So you literally just let the chickens do what the chickens do. They eat naturally, they go to the bathroom, right? That whole process. And it better prepares the ground for farming. Like, this is what Mother Nature does when humans / Homo sapiens don't interfere, right? So this is a return to how things naturally work and how to make farming more organic. An interesting thing that I learned with this report is that they say worms love ground coffee beans. So it's one of the things they were doing to prepare the land, with a, really good soil, is they collected beans from the local coffee shops, ground up beans, and they were putting it on the ground. And apparently the worms go crazy for it and hopefully don't get too stimulated with the caffeine. I don't know. Maybe it makes them work harder. I don't know. Worms are like all jacked up on caffeine. I'm not sure how that works. Still, very interesting to see this whole process and the different stages that their land goes through to prepare it to grow crops for their community. All right, Sherry out of Indiana takes us to a historic hotel, which was originally launched. That's probably not the right word. The opening for it was in 1902. It's in Indiana. And it was known for this huge dome that was part of the hotel. I don't know if it was really in the middle of the hotel, but they show all of these pictures of the inside because there for a while, it was really going downhill. You couldn't even go inside of it, but they renovated it. I think she said from 1996 to 2007, it was a really big renovation project. And now it's been restored to its former glory. And you can go in, you can stay there. I think when it first launched, it was known as the 8th wonder of the world. Now, there's probably other domed hotels created since then. But again, just, kind of go back in time in your mind and picture what this would have been like. And a neat story. And boy, if those walls could talk. Also making headlines this week, you guys probably saw the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down these crazy tariffs that we are dealing with. So that just happened. But the story that we were working on previously was about how these tariffs are impacting people. So there was new research from the Kiel Institute that suggests tariffs work less like a shield and more like a hidden price tag for shoppers in the U.S. While tariffs are often promoted as making foreign exporters pay, the study found they cover only about 4% of the cost, meaning the foreign exporters are only paying about 4% of the cost, with roughly 96% passed on to U.S. consumers and businesses through higher prices.
So let me give you a hypothetical scenario so you can see how it affects you. So let's say that I'm a skincare brand that imports all of my goods from South Korea. So I manufacture in South Korea, I bring the goods in the United States, and I sell them to the American consumer. And let's say that it was originally costing me $10 per item. And then suddenly I get hit with the 25% tariff. As a business, I will suddenly have to pay $12.50 per item. $2.50 will go to the US government in the form of a tax, and then I get my $10 item. So let's say previously I was selling that good for $20, and now I'm paying $12.50 for it. There are two ways that a business can respond to tariffs. So the first thing that they can do is they can absorb the tariff into their profit and loss. They could say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to pass this on to the consumer. I'm just going to make less profit this year. Now, if you're a business with phenomenal margins, meaning that you're paying $1 for a good and you're selling it for $100, you can absorb that 25%. But most businesses don't even have a 25% profit margin. They don't even have a 10% profit margin. And in fact, a 25 or a 34% tariff would completely eliminate their profit. They would probably be losing money. So if you're like most businesses and you can't afford to absorb the tariff, then you have to pass that tariff on to the American consumer by increasing your prices.
Experts, including voices connected to Harvard Kennedy School, say tariffs may encourage domestic production, but building factories, shifting supply chains, and lowering prices can take years, meaning Americans often feel the financial impact long before any economic benefits appear. Argan oil, often called liquid gold, has grown from a traditional product in Morocco into a booming global industry, with about 90% produced in the Souss Massa, a protected area recognized by UNESCO. For generations, Berber women have made the oil by hand. And while cooperatives expanded with support, noted by the Moroccan Ministry of Agriculture, global demand has shifted profits toward multinational beauty companies like L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, and Unilever. Market data from the Market Research Future shows the industry keeps growing, yet many local women earn less as middlemen, and large exporters capture most of the financial gains.
The worldwide boom in demand has a darker side too. It's draining Morocco's forests and the communities that have historically relied on them. Some of the processes have modernized, but today people still have to crack and peel argan nuts by hand to make the oil. It takes them 2 days to crack 1 kilogram of nuts, which earns them around $3, even as bottles can sell for 10 to 20 times that abroad. As the demand grows, the argan tree forests are also facing other threats, climate change and drought. Even though the trees are incredibly resilient in harsh conditions, they're not invincible, and the forests have shrunk by 40% since the turn of the century.
In India, a growing stray dog population, estimated at more than 52 million, including large numbers in Delhi, has sparked a national debate over public safety, animal rights, and how laws should be enforced. Data cited by the World Health Organization shows the country accounts for about 36% of global rabies deaths, mostly from dog bites.
He lives on the streets on 3 legs, and he's living very happily. He lives right in front of our house.
But here in New Delhi, dog lovers and animal welfare groups have squared off against the country's top court to keep these dogs from being rounded up and forced into shelters. Judges had cited a sharp rise in dog bite reports and the death of a 6-year-old girl from a dog attack. Many supported the court's decision, calling dog advocates out of touch from the realities of Indian city living. Animal welfare groups, however, argued that the plan was inhumane and a logistical impossibility.
Recent rulings from the Supreme Court of India aim to tighten population control and remove dogs from sensitive public spaces. But reports of illegal mass killings highlight the growing gap between humane policy and real-world enforcement, fueling public anger and investigations. Acid mine drainage is a long-lasting environmental problem where chemical reactions from exposed minerals create sulfuric acid and release toxic metals into waterways, sometimes for decades after mining ends. In the U.S., the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency estimates thousands of miles of streams are affected, with major impacts in historic mining regions like the Appalachia. While research backed by the U.S. Department of Energy shows polluted water could contain small amounts of valuable rare earth elements, experts say recovery is still limited, meaning prevention and cleanup remain far more important than trying to turn pollution into a new mining resource.
For all the harm done by acid mine drainage, it's difficult to think of how it might help us. But dissolved in its acidic waters, there are valuable minerals critical to clean energy technology. And with a grant from the Department of Energy, a team of researchers at Penn State has set out to prove they can be recovered.
So this acid mine drainage has become a resource now for these minerals. While we are treating the acid mine drainage for its acidity, we can also get these minerals.
Yeah, it's a little backward, but at least they're trying to view things on the bright side, right? Well, spam makes up nearly half of all global email traffic. It sends more than 160 billion unwanted messages daily, and it turns what was once simple junk marketing into a major cybersecurity threat. While modern spam filters catch most of it, depending on which one you use, scammers constantly evolve using phishing links, malware, fake websites, and AI-generated messages that look more personal and convincing.
Here's how to spot them. Check the sender's email address and make sure it looks legit. Then watch out for urgent language. Phishing emails often want to create a sense of urgency. Next, hover over links before clicking on them and check if they look suspicious. Finally, look for bad grammar or weird attachments. Legit companies are not likely to make grammar mistakes, and they wouldn't send attachments you weren't expecting.
Because filters can't catch everything, experts say it's safer to mark suspicious emails as spam instead of unsubscribing, which can confirm your address is active and lead to even more unwanted or dangerous messages. New 2026 changes to SNAP benefits from the U.S. Department of Agriculture could make it harder for millions to keep food benefits, even though the program helps about 42 million people monthly in the U.S. The rules expand work requirements, raising the age limit to 64 and requiring at least 80 hours a month of work, training, or volunteering, while reducing some past exemptions. Supporters say the changes promote employment and reduce costs, but critics warn they could increase hunger, especially for older adults and vulnerable groups already struggling with high food prices.
Everyone subject to these work requirements are legally eligible for the program. So this has nothing to do with fraud. This is a bait and switch. Look, there's a right way and a wrong way to reduce the SNAP rolls. The bottom line is hunger's increasing in America due to Trump's failed economic policies. Jobs are going away, actually. You reported yesterday that Eddie Bauer's across the country could be closing. The right way is to help people no longer need SNAP by moving them to living wage jobs.
Farmers across the U.S. are struggling as record harvests of crops like corn and soybeans have pushed prices below the cost of production, squeezing farm incomes even as output stays high. Data and outlooks from the U.S. Department of Agriculture show exports and demand have weakened, partly due to trade tensions, which we talked a little bit about earlier, and lost sales to markets like China, while competition from lower-cost producers adds pressure.
Farmers are relatively weak players in the system, price takers in economic terms, meaning they have to take the price that the grain company offers. They want as much product on the market as they possibly can get. They don't want any limitations, and they want to pay prices as cheap as they possibly can when they're buying corn or soy or whatever.
Experts, including research tied to the World Wildlife Fund, suggest shifting some farmland toward foods Americans eat domestically could help stabilize income, but high costs, limited infrastructure, and financial risk make that transition difficult for many farmers. In Nigeria, informal battery recycling is causing severe environmental and health risks, especially in Ojiho, where lead contamination levels have reached about 1,900 parts per million, which is far higher than levels seen in Vernon during a major U.S. pollution case. Investigations found recycled lead from used batteries can enter global supply chains linked to companies like Tesla, Ford, and General Motors.
Millions of car batteries in America rely on a deadly secret: lead recycled in Nigeria. Poisonous dust from crude lead recycling factories is contaminating Ogijo town. These supply lead for American car batteries. As the U.S. tightened lead processing regulations, the auto industry outsourced the hazardous recycling to countries like Nigeria, where enforcement is lax. An investigation and tests by the New York Times and The Examination showed that 7 out of 10 Ogijo residents, all tested workers, and over half the tested children had dangerous levels of lead in their blood.
While battery recycling is important, weak regulation and unsafe informal processing expose communities to toxic lead dust, fumes, and soil contamination, highlighting the urgent need for stronger enforcement, safer recycling practices, and cleanup of polluted areas. And our final story, across the world, comedy can bring serious consequences, with tensions between free expression and authority playing out in different places, like Lebanon, the UK, and right here in the United States. In some cases, comedians and public figures such as Graham Linehan and Jimmy Kimmel have faced investigations, public backlash, or professional consequences after controversial jokes.
A comedian tells a joke about the president. Days later, his show is gone from the airwaves, not because of ratings, not because of advertisers, but because the government hinted that bad things might happen if broadcasters didn't fall in line. This is not some overseas puppet regime. This is right here in America with ABC, Donald Trump, and Jimmy Kimmel. Now, when the FCC chair says effectively, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, and the networks suddenly pull a late night show, is that smart business or is it government censorship by proxy?
While laws, culture, and enforcement vary widely, the global pattern shows that when comedy challenges power, it often sparks debates about where free speech ends and social or legal consequences begin. So I mentioned at the start of this episode that we don't have any sound bites from Kim. She's been very busy, a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, I'm sure. If you guys have been paying attention to the headlines recently, there's all this talk of us potentially going to war with Iran. This is a good time, I think, for me to remind everybody that the stuff that they're putting out in mainstream media and even in alternative media where that is controlled as well is what they want you to focus on. So that is a intimidation, a fear tactic that they use. They want you because they don't have hardly any power anymore because their power really came from the Matrix, which is crumbling. So what they'll do is they'll put these false narratives out there in the media. They want you, the powerful ones, the Homo sapiens, to manifest this for them. So they want war because in the past that has led to control for them, that has led to money and a lot of other things. And so that's what they want to happen. So I would encourage you guys to not follow their grift, right? That's what they want you to do. They can't do it on their own, and they're hoping you do it for them. So unplug if you can, take a break, get out in nature, hang out with people that you love, and enjoy life as much as you can. And before you know it, this matrix will be gone. Oh, I almost forgot. Kim did have a post on Telegram that I'll read for you guys real quick. This came out on the 18th, so a few days ago. She says, just a quick update, loads of reports online about timeline splits or something big on February 17th. That eclipse seems to have fallen flat. However, that doesn't mean we didn't have loads of turbulence. The deep state seems to have been prepared for some kind of war against the loss of the AI realities. Things have still not stabilized yet as they are still fighting to the end. They have been trying desperately to use me, meaning Kim, in some way to anchor their machine before I leave Durango for good. I plan on getting a report out as soon as possible. Let's see. There are a lot of angry, frustrated people out there today. Things should level out over the next 24 hours. Happy Chinese New Year and Ramadan if you are celebrating. That wraps up this episode. For more information about who we are, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. That also has a ton of great information for those of you who are interested in taking the leap and becoming a field messenger and reporting on what's going on in your neighborhood. Again, this is, a lot of people complain about the news. This is a way around that. If you don't want people telling you, right, these talking heads out there telling you what you should believe, then start making reports yourself. Tell us what's going on in your neighborhood. And again, we have a whole production team that can help you with that. And if you want instant access to all of these reports as we release them, I encourage you guys to become a member. More information on the website about that as well. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.